Hello and welcome to Session 6. Today we're going to talk about Chapter 26 of the book. This is written by James F. Fife. And first of all, he argues that individuals often fail to distinguish police violence that is clearly extra-legal and abusive from violence that is the unnecessary result of police ineptitude. And according to Fife, there is a great difference between these two types of violence. And he argues that it's important to define these carefully. Extra-legal violence, according to Fife, involves the wrongful use of force by officers who knowingly and willingly exceed the bounds of their office. Unnecessary violence occurs when well-meaning officers prove that they are simply incapable of dealing with the situation, and so they're too quick to resort to force unnecessarily. I think one of the whole arguments behind the use of the electronic energy devices like the taser and the stun gun, it's not that the weapon itself is lethal, although in a few occasions it has proven to be, but it's that I think that officers are much quicker to use those devices than they are more lethal devices. And so you might see a lot of decisions that this sort of police action could have been prevented, maybe through verbal intervention strategies. It's important to point out that police encounters are typically urgent and come without warning. This is similar to an emergency room, according to Fife. And so police officers have to be willing to address this problem with both a sense of delicacy and a sense of vigor. And the stakes are actually raised because most of the situations involving officers and citizen encounters occur in public. And so they have to be very conscientious of the fact that third parties are watching this encounter and evaluating them on how the encounter went down. So it's something that definitely should be considered. While Fife makes some very interesting points stressing time constraints and officer discretion to some degree, consider whether or not you think this is a pro-police account or would it be more anti-police, and that'll be up for you to decide. And then also think about what Christopher Cooper had to say. Does this article relate well to that? If so, how? These are just issues to consider as you're doing the reading. Also, according to Fife, many police tasks have little to do with crime or law, and many may have to do more with service or other acts that do not require coercion or the threat of force. So while it's important to think about use of force, this is something that does not occur on a routine basis for police officers. And I think this being a graduate class, most of you are probably familiar with that already, but it's important to go ahead and reiterate that point. Chapter 27 is by Noble and Alpert, who's of course one of the editors of the book. They discuss the issue of implementation of force by police officers, and they consider the implications of reckless decisions made by police when they're in a dangerous situation. The authors contend that all situations can be dealt with in various ways and argue that it is important for officers to consciously avoid putting them in a situation where they'll be required to use deadly force. I thought that this chapter did a particularly good job talking about training, and they acknowledge to a certain extent that there are caveats involved in the training. It's unrealistic to attempt to prepare a police officer for every single imaginable field situation. However, there are predictable types of behavior and effective tactical strategies that allow officers to avoid placing themselves and others at risk of injury. And according to the authors, officers can learn how to use tactical strategies in order to decrease the need to impose a significant level of force in order to resolve a situation. I thought that the authors also gave a very interesting discussion about vehicles and the use of police vehicles and incidents involving vehicles. And that's something I think it would be important to look over. I'm not going to discuss it here, but I thought they did make some good points. But I want to get back to this training. Much of police use of force training, and this has changed recently in some respects, but the author suggests that shooting drills, where you have officers focused on shooting fixed targets and they're comfortably positioned several yards away, this really does not take into account sort of the fact that officers need to make judgments. You know, teaching them marksmanship is fine, but what about teaching them to make judgments and life and death types of decisions? So training that can take into account a sort of element of role playing, and this could involve maybe interactive videos. This is going to be more realistic, but even then it's maybe unrealistic to the extent that it fails to create the level of stress that's going to be generated in a real type of use of force incident where an officer needs to take out their weapon. And if you talk to any police officers that have been involved in deadly uses of force, they'll tell you that they literally felt, as though they hadn't been, had never experienced anything like this, and maybe it's impossible to truly have a training, module that can simulate something like that. It's unfortunately the type of thing that maybe there's just no way to possibly prepare for. But understanding the weaknesses, police organizations have begun to focus their use of force training on more decision-making models. In any incident that requires a decision to be made, appropriate training and standards of behavior are vital for the safety of officers and with those whom they interact, according to the authors. And looking over here, you can see there are definitely issues that you should know. I think the Graham versus Connor would be a good decision to look at. Also, what are mistakes, according to the authors? So those are a few of the key aspects of that chapter. And the final chapter that I want to look at is chapter 28. Chapter 28 is written by Kenneth Adams, who's an alumnus at Sam Houston State University, which is where I got 2 of my degrees. He graduated sometime before me. According to Adams, one important detail we should know about police use of force relates to substantial confidence. And the author refers to substantial confidence. This is something that they use when they use force infrequently. And whether one is analyzing citizen complaints, victim surveys, use of force reports, or any other method of data collection, only a small percentage of police public interactions result in the use of force and subsequent injury, according to Adams. Other details that we know about police use of force with modest confidence are that the use of force appears to be unrelated to an officer's personal characteristics. Yes, you heard that right. According to Adams, characteristics such as age, gender, and ethnicity may not be related to use of force. And that's something that I would caution you to accept 100%. I think if you look in certain police departments and certain precincts, you're going to find that the excessive uses of force that are perpetuated are going to be committed by a small percentage of officers, they're probably going to be more likely to be prone to making arrests. Younger white males. So that's something that we may discuss in the discussion board, but it's not something that I would test you over and say, oh, you need to be able to cite what Kenneth Adams says here, because I think it's debatable. He does say, though, that the use of force is related to experience, probably a lack thereof, and I think I would agree with that. I think that younger officers especially are going to have less experience. It may not be the experience, it could be the youth, but there's so many things that we clearly do not know. For example, the rate of incidents of wrongful use of force by police, this is unknown. If we're generally speaking, if we look at a specific department, specific precinct, it becomes a little easier. And so Adams calls for more research, and I think that that's something that a lot of articles will do. You know, they give you kind of a statement of the problem, and then they always say we need more research. He says it's critically needed to determine the reliability, validity, and precisely how often transgressions of use of force occur. And in addition, the impact of differences in police organizations, looking at their administrative policies, hiring, training, discipline, use of technology, all of these factors on excessive and illegal use of force hasn't really been studied. And so research is critically needed in this area. Now, I will point to you this. This is an article that was written a while ago, and so it's likely that you could probably do a search and be able to find these types of things, find more recent literature, hopefully. But all of these influences of situational characteristics on police use of force and the transactional nature of these events, these are still, to some degree, largely unknown. And so we're going to need to see more research. Research of very large scales that are funded federally with grants that have multiple people working on them, and with large sample sizes and so forth. This is all going to be necessary, and I think the research would be very worthwhile as far as doing. A few things that you do need to know about. I would take a look at the fact that he describes the dynamics of most police use of force. Oftentimes it occurs when there's alcohol and drugs involved with the suspect, someone that's been drinking or on stimulants. I don't know if people on marijuana would offer a lot of resistance, but they might. But police use of force typically occurs at the lower end of the force spectrum, which is a good thing. This is just grabbing, pushing, or shoving. So these are all different issues to think about. The Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994 is worth taking a look at. And the supplemental reading is on the Blackboard homepage. And I'm not going to go into it much here at all, really, because I also have a lecture that is available on the homepage as well. So read the article. It's a very, very interesting article that talks about juvenile interrogation and juvenile interrogation and police practices. And then download the audio lecture. Both of these are available on the homepage, and the lecture will go into the article as well as some other crucial factors that you need to know about for this next discussion. If you have any questions, you can see the band I put up there, the police. But if you do have any questions, feel free to contact me or bring these to the discussion board. And I look forward to seeing everyone online. Have a great day. Signing off if I can.